Tuesday, April 6, 2021, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at how crony capitalism is thriving in Britain and also in the United States for that matter. This is not just happening here in the UK, it's happening in Europe as well, everywhere around the world. People seem to think that government and the state need to be involved in the economy, and that's not so. I'm going to look at an article here about this British government bank that's been created since the crisis broke out last year. And that's what they do. The powers that be, big corporations, big government, they exploit these crises to bring about these new schemes. They've got a lot of distractions going on, of course, about the whole lockdown thing, all the vaccines, and in the meantime, they're siphoning your hard-earned taxpayer money into the coffers of their crony capitalist friends. And just before I start, I just wanted to touch upon the 19th century, because a lot of people seem to think you need government to build bridges, to build railroad stations, to build canals. But people forget that in the 19th century, these projects were financed by capitalists. They didn't have government behind them. They were risking their own capital. And I'll give you a couple of examples. You've got Eads Bridge. Where is Eads Bridge? Well, it says it is a combined road and railway bridge over the Mississippi River connecting the cities of St. Louis, Missouri, East St. Louis, Illinois. It is located on the St. Louis riverfront between Laclede Landing to the north and the grounds of the Gateway Arch to the south. The bridge is named for its designer and builder, James Buchanan Eads. It was commissioned by Andrew Carnegie. Work on the bridge began in 1867 and it was completed in 1874. Eads Bridge was the first bridge across the Mississippi south of the Missouri River. Earlier bridges were located north of the Missouri, where the Mississippi is smaller. None of the earlier bridges survive, which means that Eads Bridge is also the oldest bridge on the river. So yes, Andrew Carnegie risked his fortune to build this bridge. It wasn't state government or federal government that helped, that built this bridge. There was no infrastructure spending from the government at the time, and even this new infrastructure package that they're proposing, the $2 trillion, I think actually only 5% is for building roads and bridges, and the rest is just like pork for friends of politicians, right? The crony capitalists. Another example, the Grand Central Station in New York, Grand Central Terminal, that was built by the Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt. He started out in shipping. He had ferries, and then he became one of the biggest ship owners in the U.S. Transport people, goods, and then he saw that the railroads were picking up, and he switched into railroads. He was probably the richest man in America at one point, and he commissioned Grand Central Station. It wasn't built by the city of New York. It wasn't built by the federal government. It was built by the companies that he owned, the railroad companies. So here we go. History. Grand Central Terminal arose from a need to build a central station for the Hudson River Railroad, the New York and Harlem Railroad, and the New York and New Haven Railroad in modern-day Midtown Manhattan. The business magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt bought the Hudson River and New York Central railroads in 1867 and merged them 2 years later. That Vanderbilt developed a proposal to unite the three separate railroads at a single central station, replacing the separate and adjacent stations that created chaos in baggage transfer. So this wasn't government. This wasn't through taxation. It was through risk, through free market capitalism. Granted, a lot of these capitalists in the 19th century, they weren't perfect. They were called the robber barons. Eventually, the government cracked down on them. That's another debate for another time. All I'm trying to say here, we don't need government for building infrastructure or for building anything. And with that, I'm going to go to this book, small book, not very long. Anyone can really read it. It's called The Law by Frederick Bastiat. And what's the law got to do with this? Well, the law talks about the real purpose, what the law should be, what the state should do in terms of protecting people, individuals and their property. That the law shouldn't be used like it is today to extract wealth from one group of people and give it to others. And that's crony capitalism. And this applies also to the welfare state, to socialism. That is wrong as well. So both are wrong in my opinion. Both are immoral. So let's quickly go through the beginning of the book here to give you an idea about the law. First, let's read a little bit about Frederick Bastiat, and I will get to the British government getting involved in business. It says, Frederick Bastiat, it is impossible to introduce into society a greater change and a greater evil than this, the conversion of the law into an instrument of plunder. France of 1850 was in political turmoil. In the aftermath of the Revolution of 1848, the tide of socialism was sweeping the nation. One man stood alone against the tide. The precocious son of a merchant, Frederick Bastiat devoured the writings of free trade economists such as Adam Smith, Jean-Baptiste Say. Rejecting the popular notions of his day, Bastiat began to speak and write against ideas he believed were undermining natural harmonies of interest among men. First as an orator and essayist, later as a member of the Legislative Assembly, he became known for withering logic and devastating wit. He also became isolated politically. The struggle between left and right was for power and plunder. So there you go. Left and right, power and plunder. Yet Bastiat believed that the only purpose of government was to guarantee individual rights and freedom. And this is one of his famous or most memorable epigrams. It says, "The state is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else." So there you go. Highly recommend this book. I'm going to put a free PDF. No excuse for you not to read it. A free PDF, a link to it in the description. You can also buy the book if you want. You can find it anywhere really, on Amazon or even in the Mises.org website. I would use the Mises.org website. I would want to help the Mises Institute because the Mises Institute is a proponent of free market economics, the Austrian School of Economics. So if you do buy the book, make sure you do it from the Mises.org website. If you don't, you can just read the free PDF. So, yes, I saw this story yesterday in the FT. Taxpayers should know more about UK's venture capital spree. So now we're getting into venture capital. The Future Fund, it's called. Sounds really good, doesn't it? And just before I start, sorry to interrupt the beginning of this story again. A lot of you probably know about Solyndra. Well, that was another example of not only is this kind of crony capitalism or even welfare socialism, it doesn't just waste taxpayers' money, it's also immoral because you're taking it from one group of people and giving it to the other. Government is using force through taxation to do that. Yeah, Solyndra is a big example. It says here, the company filed for bankruptcy on September 1st, 2011. An investigation found Solyndra executives misled federal officials to obtain $535 million in government-backed loans with the help of former President Barack Obama's White House. So, and I'm not blaming Democrats only. This happens in every administration, left or right. You can bet on that. That's the other thing about government getting involved, because it's not their money that they're giving to this company. So they don't worry about it. It's not like Vanderbilt putting his money to build that station, or Carnegie putting that money to build that bridge. If they failed, they would have been ruined. But when government does it, we get left with the bill, right? So here we go. The Future Fund has backed more than 1,200 companies, yet the government is saying remarkably little about it. So no transparency either. So here we got Chancellor Rishi Sunak originally capped the Future Fund to $250 million of public money, but it was quickly expanded. I would say as well, there's a huge conflict of interest with this guy, the Chancellor. A Chancellor means the equivalent to the Secretary of the Treasury. So he's the Yellen of the UK. His father-in-law is one of the richest men in India. They're involved in private equity business. So you can see the conflict of interest there already. He used to work for, I think, Goldman Sachs as well, Sunak. So let's go through this story. At least the FT is covering it, but they don't call it crony capitalism, of course. The lack of private funding for startups and high growth business has long been a source of concern in this country. Well, maybe there isn't private funds around because they don't allow small investors to thrive. They don't allow people who have their own business to thrive. They tax and regulate people so much. So maybe that's why there isn't private fund. And by doing this, what they're doing, they're taking money from small investors by taxing them and saying, we know better what to do with your money. They're crowding out investors' funds and putting it into their crony capitalist friends. So not only is that immoral, but it's also a misallocation of capital. Because governments are not there to be investment firms, you should leave that to the private sector. You should leave that to risk takers, people who are willing to bet all their fortune like Mr. Carnegie did with that bridge. Yeah, that bridge, he had trouble with that. He had to get financing because it took a long time to build the bridge and he was running out of funds. Well, rejoice. It turns out the UK has the biggest venture capital fund in Europe. I wouldn't be rejoicing. I think it's a bad thing. And it is managed by none other than the government. That's worrying. It is odd that the emergence of Her Majesty's Treasury as a major venture capital investor has not prompted more questions, particularly when so little is known about where it has been putting our money. The Future Fund, run through the British Business Bank, has racked up $1.2 billion in convertible loans to innovative businesses. Well, they don't care about the $1.2 billion that will be at risk. That will be charged to us eventually, to the taxpayer. This might feel like small change against the billions doled out in various COVID-19 support packages. At some point, though, the Chancellor should tell us more about what is going on in this mega fund. Launched in April last year, it's almost as if they knew this was going to happen because April was only a month after the crisis kicked off. And it seems to me like they knew this was going to happen way before this crisis started. And it was used again as an opportunity to, never let a crisis go to waste. The fund was an attempt to stop a slew of startup and early stage businesses going under as other sources of funding dried up. Originally restricted to 250 million of public money, it was quickly expanded. So it's almost 5 times more now, and you can bet it's going to get much bigger. That means more taxes for us, more misallocation of resources, more malinvestments, as the Austrians would call it, more cylinders all around, right? The other thing about this, they talked here, just the last part I covered, that when the crisis broke out, a lot of startups and early stage businesses were going under. Well, I'm sorry to say that's how capitalism works. When things go under, it means that they're not economical, that they shouldn't be around. Yes, there was a crisis, but that's the way of the world. We have to let people and businesses fail, or else eventually the whole of the economy and society will collapse, because people are not used to hardship. Life is about ups and downs. You can only have an up if you've had a down, but if you don't have any risk, things are not going to work out for you. You spoil society like that. You spoil business like that. It's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. So with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 8:33 a.m. London. Gold has been up to 1739 earlier this morning, but as London and the continent came in, gold and silver have come off. Gold right now is at 1731, up just over $2. Low has been 1725.50. Silver was trading quite well about an hour or so ago. It got up to 25.21. It was outperforming gold, but now we're back down to 24.86. So there's still a lot of manipulation of the paper market. But do you want to finance crony capitalism? Do you want to finance socialism? Because that's what you do. And when you keep your savings in fiat currency, you're financing the government that puts forward these schemes. By having gold and silver outside the system, you're not playing their game. I guess cryptocurrencies as well. By having cryptocurrencies, you're not financing government as well. So the Dow future is down 50 points, 33,400. I think we're still making all-time highs in the stock market. Is just a joke, right? I mean, I watched Doug Casey yesterday. He does a daily video with Matthew Smith, and he was saying, really, I can't tell you what's going on in the economy, in the markets. Everything is so fake, and there's so many lies out there about what's going on that it's difficult to say. And I agree with him. S&P 500 is down 10 points at 4,065. NASDAQ 100 future is down 50 points. So stock market under a little bit of pressure, but it will probably be up hundreds of points later on when the US comes in. The currencies, yesterday, the dollar dropped fairly sharply versus the pound and the euro. You can see here that the dollar index seems to have topped since the end of March. We're back down below 93. Have to keep an eye on that, of course. The short-term move in the dollar could impact precious metals. We've got the pound today, though, down just over 0.1% at 138.80. The euro is unchanged, 118.12. The dollar is up slightly versus the Japanese yen at 110.36. Dollar's down versus the yuan about 0.1% at 6.55. High-grade copper rallied quite strongly yesterday. We're now at 409, down 1% this morning. WTI crude I saw dropped quite sharply yesterday as well, but it's back up a little bit. It's up 1.2% here, just under 59.50. And to finish off, the 10-year yield is at 171, down about 1 basis point. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.